It's really glad to have you join us. We're so happy that you're with us for our study through the Gospel of Mark. And what's happening is we're coming face to face with Jesus. And man, you have a face-to-face encounter with Jesus Christ, it will have a significant impact on your life. And so this morning we're gonna see him again face to face in the Gospel of Mark. It seems to me that there's an unusual amount of fear in the air these days. Have you noticed? I mean, people are jumpy, people are edgy, people are afraid of a number of things. Did you hear? Did you read that? Did you know this is what's really going on? People are afraid about sending their kids back to school. They're afraid to send them to school. They're afraid not to send them to school, right? The teachers are afraid to go to school. The parents are afraid to send the kids to school. The kids just want to get out of the house. They're ready to go and be with their friends. People are afraid of the upcoming presidential election. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? Who's going to be elected? What's going to happen to the country? They're afraid of the rioting. People are afraid of the deep state and what they read on QAnon. And people are afraid about the economy. What's going to happen to that? What's their financial situation going to be? And some guys are afraid of what is Saturday morning going to be like this fall with no college football. How could we handle that reality? Well, this morning we're going to see people who are afraid. They're very afraid. Sometimes our fears are unreasonable, right? There's something under the bed, we say. There's a spot on your arm. I think that's cancer. And, we go, no, that's chocolate, right? Sometimes our fears are unreasonable, unfounded, but sometimes there's good reason for fear. People say our country could crumble. Well, yes, countries and nations have crumbled throughout history. Well, Christians could lose some of their freedoms. We could be persecuted. It's true. I mean, Christians have been persecuted and martyred throughout church history. There's good reason to fear some. Well, the virus could kill you. Well, that's right, it could. But here's what you should fear. Something is going to kill you someday, right? And Jesus had a way of putting our fears all in that kind of perspective when he said in Matthew, he said, don't fear those who kill the body, but can't kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both body and soul in hell. Wow. So this morning as we see people who are very afraid of a variety of things, and they have good reason to fear because they're facing some realities in their lives right then that powerfully were affecting them. They were facing some powerful forces that were way out of their ability to control. That's what gets fearful for us. We face things that are beyond our ability to manage and control. This is always fearful producing, right? The world will roll over on top of you. The other shoe will drop. What happens when evil people get into positions of power? What we're going to see in the Gospel of Mark is every time people come face to face with Jesus in their fearful situations, what they realize when they see Jesus is this: there is someone greater than their greatest fear. And Jesus asks them and asks us, will you trust me? Will you trust me? That's the question for all of us this morning when we go through this section in the Gospel of Mark. I want you to bring your fears this morning, your fears today. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of today? And are you ready to bring your fears face to face with Jesus? So turn to Mark chapter 4, the Gospel of Mark chapter 4, the first powerful force that the disciples are going to encounter the powerful forces of nature. Mark chapter 4. I'll begin reading in verse 35. On that day, when evening had come, Jesus said to them, "Let's go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. And other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. And he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. Okay, for those who are nautically challenged, the stern is the back of the boat. Jesus is asleep. And they woke him up, and they said to him, "Teacher, Master, do you not care that we are perishing?" The Sea of Galilee sits in a bowl. It's 600 feet below sea level. There's steep cliffs, hills around it, and there's some openings at ends of the lake. And the winds will often come down and whip this and churn up the sea very suddenly. You know, hurricanes are not very scary when you watch them on the Weather Channel. You know, Hurricane Laura didn't evoke a whole lot of fear in me in the last week. But listen, when you're trying to ride out a hurricane at sea in a small boat, it's the powerful forces of nature are indeed frightening. And Jesus is asleep. This is staggering. It's stunning to us. He's asleep. Remember that he was totally God and totally man. And in Jesus' humanity, he got tired. He needed sleep and rest, and he's exhausted. He's so exhausted, he's sleeping through the storm. You ever seen someone sleep through something that surprised you? I remember as a youth pastor, we were traveling back across the country in some bus, and the students were exhausted. They slept anywhere, on the floor, in the trash. It's like, oh my goodness. And they would paint faces on each other, and they wouldn't even notice because they were so tired. If you had a family member asleep on the couch, you say, "I think I could light a firecracker," and they wouldn't wake up. Well, it was comical at first for the disciples with the storm and Jesus sleeping. Man alive, he could sleep through anything. But all of a sudden, the water starts filling up in the boat, and watch how their questions in their heart turn. And all of a sudden, they wake Jesus up and they say, "Wait a second, don't you care? Jesus, don't you care that we're perishing?" Verse 39, and Jesus woke and rebuked the wind, and he said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said, and looked to the disciples, the only thing you heard was the dripping of the water off of their clothes in the bottom of the boat. And Jesus said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Someone greater than their greatest fears was standing right in front of their face. You know, God never says that you and I won't go through storms, destructive storms. But what he asks of you and me is, will you trust me? Why are you so afraid? Like he asked the disciples. He asked, wait a second, why are you so afraid? Have you no faith? When you come face to face with Jesus, and I want you to do that this morning with the storms of your life, Jesus says, look, have faith in my heart. I do care. Have faith in my abilities. The winds and the waves obey my voice. The forces of nature are all under my command. It's amazing. The book of Hebrews describes Jesus. Hebrews chapter 1, listen carefully. Long ago, at many times and in many various ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, he's spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, and through whom also he created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he, Jesus, upholds the universe by the word of his power. The forces of nature know the voice of their master. We sang that old hymn last week. Do you remember? Be still, my soul. Why can we tell our soul to be still of its fears? The hymn says, the waves and winds still know his voice who ruled them while he dwelt below. Listen, sometimes God calms the storm. He walks in and says, peace, be still. But sometimes he calms our soul in the storm. And we ask him and we wonder, and our faith gets challenged. Lord, don't you care? Lord, you seem to be sleeping. Well, Hebrews 5 says, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. Are you afraid? What are you afraid of this morning, church? What are you afraid of? Will you bring those fears face to face with Jesus? Are you afraid that the Lord doesn't care? Are you afraid that he's asleep during your storm? Are you afraid of the storm? When facing the fearful forces of nature, there is someone greater than your greatest fears. Will you trust him? Well, the second scene that Jesus shows up in, and we come face to face with him, is in chapter 5. It's the forces of the spirit world. The forces of nature, and then these are the powerful forces of the unseen spirit world. Chapter 5, verse 1, they came to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs. This is where they buried people, like in caves and different things in the mountains all over the place. And he lived there in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces, and no one had the strength to subdue him. And so night and day, among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. This is an unsettling situation. This man, this is disturbing, people would say. Imagine if this guy lived in your neighborhood. I mean, for a while here in Ashland, I lived 4 houses from Ashland Cemetery. And imagine if in the middle of the night, a guy screaming runs wildly past the house. The other gospels say a lot of times he wasn't even wearing clothes. So this guy's just crazy. And you say, what would you do? You say, well, I'd call the cops. Well, guess what? They say, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do for that guy. You see, the schools couldn't handle him. The medical professionals and health professionals, they could not handle him. They were stumped on this case. And the law enforcement couldn't contain him. This guy's like evil unleashed. This guy's possessed. You're around him and you go, wait a second, I don't feel safe. Somebody make me feel safe. Well, no one could. It was very unsettling when you come face to face with the forces of the spirit world, and no one had the strength to subdue him, it says in the text. Verse 6. And when Jesus, when this guy running around the tombs, when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him, and crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjourn you by God, do not torment me." For Jesus was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" And the spirits inside of this man replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him, the spirits inside this man begged Jesus earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs were feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, "Send us to the pigs, let us enter them." So he gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the sea. It's an amazing story. Now listen, I grew up in the suburbs, okay? The high school I went to, we didn't know what FFA was. There was no chapter. We didn't have 4-H. That was a long way. So listen, I get a little uncomfortable when I'm out at the Ashland County Fair and I'm walking through the hog barn and one of those big old boys gets loose. I'm a little bit uneasy with this, all right? Imagine standing there and down the hillside comes 2,000 possessed pigs. That's a lot of deviled ham. All right, that's a bad joke. But this is frightening. Now listen, Jesus was very clear that Satan and his demons are real. If you are one to say, nah, that whole spirit world thing didn't exist, Jesus said they do exist, and that he said they want to destroy your life. These are the words of Jesus. Satan is a liar and a murderer and the father of lies, and the demons are out to destroy your life. The most powerful weapon that Satan and the demons have is the lie. They lie to you about God. They lie to you about reality. They lie to you about life and how it's supposed to work. And they lie to you about how powerful they are. Here's reality. Jesus created all of the angels. Some of the angels, led by Satan, rebelled against God. These are called fallen angels. Satan and demons are all called fallen angels, or here in Mark 5, referred to as unclean spirits. But understand, these are all created beings from Jesus. Jesus, it says in Colossians chapter 1, verse 16. It says, Jesus, for by him all things were created, listen, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. Whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. So what happens is these demons meet their maker. The demons meet their maker. And like Pastor Josh said a few weeks ago, these demons, they knew who Jesus was. See, the demons knew how accountable they were to God, to Jesus, for every move that they made. The demons know that their judgment is coming. All of this comes out as these demons are confronted with Jesus. In verse 7, it says, they said, crying out, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjourn you by God, do not torment me." The demons know the power of Jesus, their creator. They know their judgment is coming, and they are terrified of Jesus. It's interesting in many circles, even church circles, people are afraid of demons, and the demons are all afraid of Jesus. Someone greater than your greatest fears is here. Well, verse 14, then the herdsmen, the guys that were herding all these pigs, They thought, well, I guess I get the rest of the day off, right? The herdsmen, they fled and told, and in the city and in the country, and the people came out to see this. They told them what happened. Verse 15, and they came to Jesus, and they saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had had the legion. He was sitting there, clothed and in his right mind. And the people in the town were afraid. And those who had seen it described it to them, what had happened to the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And then these are the people in town, they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. Listen, you might have a fear this morning that coming face to face with Jesus, you don't know what Jesus will do in your life. And maybe Satan's convinced you it's fearful. These people were afraid of what Jesus might do to their life. They had their little life, they had it going, they had their stuff happening, and it's like Jesus is going to come and mess this whole thing up. And they says, we don't want any part of you. As he was getting into the boat, Jesus, the man who had been possessed with demons, begged Jesus that he might go with him. And Jesus did not permit him, but said to him, go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he's had mercy on you. And so this formerly possessed man, he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis, that's the 10-city area, how much Jesus had done for him. And everybody marveled. This man was now clothed and in his right mind. Jesus can do that for you. Jesus can do that for all of us. He can heal your mind. He can heal your memories. He can cleanse your guilt. He can free you from the addictions. He can free you from the bondage to sin. Jesus wants to show you the way. He wants to show you the truth. He wants to show you the paths of life. I want to bring you this morning, please, come face to face with Jesus here in the Gospel of Mark. Do you ever fear that you are too evil? Maybe your life feels so dark, it feels so messed up, it feels so twisted. You feel like you are too far gone. Or maybe you can't trust anybody, and you're afraid of what anybody would do, let alone Jesus. I want to bring you face to face. If you meet Jesus, listen, there's someone greater than your greatest fears. Will you trust him? Will you surrender your life to him? Will you fall at his feet and say, God, I'm dealing with things more powerful that I can handle. I need you to come into my life. The Bible says, greater is he that is in you, if you embrace Christ as your Savior, as your Lord. Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. Plead with him to have mercy on you and forgive you and save you, and he will. I love verse 19 and 20. Jesus said, don't travel with me right now. But he said, listen, this guy was on a mission now. Jesus sent him on a mission, like us. Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he's had mercy on you. And so the guy did this. He went around and proclaimed to everyone how much Jesus had done for him. And everyone marveled. Have you been freed from evil? Have you been transferred from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of Jesus' precious Son because you've been a child of God? By faith, you've come and confessed your sin, turned it, and found mercy and forgiveness and life. And now you're God's child. And no one can snatch you out of the Father's hand. Is that your story? You're no longer in Satan's grasp. No, you're free. You're a child of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Have you told anybody? You got to go tell somebody what the Lord has done for you. you're clothed and in your right mind, right? I mean, it's like you see everything differently, and life is real. And have you told someone your story? And if you're a Christian, I just got to say, the times in which we live right now, it's crazy. Christian, listen. What are you afraid of? There's so many things going on the internet, so many things passing around Facebook, so many things even in the church and Christians and outside, and people are so afraid. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? What if evil people in Washington? Listen, what do you think you're going to do? What's new? The God of this world has been at work since the beginning. There's always evil forces behind all of the nations. Read the scriptures. How do you combat that? It's not, well, if we get the right thing in Washington, then all this will be. Really? I mean, what happened with this guy in Mark chapter 5? Everything they tried, they had no strength to subdue him. Jesus Christ is the answer. While Jesus is more powerful than the forces of nature, he's more powerful than the spirit world. And then finally, scene number 3, the last scene, is Jesus is more powerful than the forces of disease and death. I'll just read through it. Mark chapter 5, starting at verse 21. And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat, if you're the disciples, you probably say, hey, let's stay out of the boat for a while, right? But he travels in the boat again to the other side. A great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue. These guys were not really pro-Jesus people, not in Capernaum where this guy came from. But one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing Jesus, fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, my little girl is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live. And Jesus went with him. That's a powerful thing. This guy had probably been critical of him and spoke against Jesus, but now he's in huge need, recognized that Jesus can help him, and he loves him. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him, and there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years, some kind of blood disease for 12 years, and who had suffered under many physicians and had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. Hopeless situation. I've been in different doctor's offices, and some of them are Christians, and sometimes on the wall they have a Bible verse that's on a plaque or something, but all the Christian doctor's offices I've been in, I've never seen this verse on the wall. She had suffered much under many physicians and had spent all she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard, though, this lady had heard the reports about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well. And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned around in the crowd and said, who touched my garments? Well, the disciples go, what? You see the crowd's pressing around you and everybody's touching. What do you mean, who touched me? And he looked around to see who had done it. And the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. And Jesus said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. While he was still speaking to her, there came from the ruler's house, remember he's on the way to this sick girl's place. They said, your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, don't fear, believe. And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. In this culture, they would bring in professional mourners as a way to express their grief at the death. And when he entered in, he said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at Jesus. But he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. And taking her by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha kumi," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age, and they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. Jesus has power over the forces of disease and death. Wow. Jesus has power over all the forces of disease, COVID, any other disease you can think of, and death. Over and over, Jesus came face to face with these forces, and he demonstrated that he was someone greater than our greatest fears. Can Jesus heal anything? Yes. Does he always heal everything? No. So how does that help my fears, you say? Well, you need to deal with life's ultimate fear, ultimate scary reality, and that is death. Often the evil one gets us distracted by lesser fears. Let's call them small f fears. And we get all paralyzed and worked up about that. And the big picture, man, we have bigger fish to fry. We have the fear, the capital F fear, which is death. Realize that everyone that Jesus healed, all the people in the scriptures that Jesus healed, guess what? They died of something else. Jesus is greater than our greatest fear, which is death. He showed up in a cemetery and said these very, very powerful, made this incredible statement about himself. Jesus said in John chapter 11, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this?" Jesus asks. And he asks you this morning. He asks you this today. Whenever you're watching this, you bring it and you know, I want to bring you face to face with Jesus. This is an amazing person. You have to, I want to bring you face to face with Jesus, and you bring all of your fears of disease and death. The book of Hebrews says Jesus will free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. And so I ask you today, what are you afraid of? Will you bring your fears to him? Will you, what powerful forces are intimidating you and overwhelming you? There's someone greater than your greatest fears. Will you trust him? You know, I want you, we'd love to talk to you. We'd love to connect with you. If you're watching this, if you would text the word Jesus, just text the word Jesus to the number on the screen. Please, somebody here at Grace would love to connect with you in just, in a format, a venue on the phone or Zoom, or meet us in person where you're comfortable. And we'd love to talk to you about your fears and how we can bring you face to face with Jesus. I want to close with a verse in Isaiah that the Lord really used in my life, and just the past week brought me again back to, Isaiah chapter 41. Listen, fear not, for I am with you, says God. I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, and I will help you, and I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Let's pray. God, I pray that we would all head to you with all of our fears, collect them all up, no matter how terrifying they are, how overwhelming they are, all these powerful forces that we frightened by, may we bring it all to you and see you face to face. And may we know that you care. And Lord, may we trust you. May we trust you. In Jesus' name, amen.